Welcome everyone back to another Mile High Sneakers restoration video. Today I have a pair of Jordan 6 lows in the University Blue colorway from 2002. The most obvious issue with these shoes is that both shoes do not have any midsole left on them, as they had ended up crumbling off due to the age of the shoes. Both uppers of the shoes do have tiny bits of the midsole remaining on them, but that's only around the areas where they were previously glued. The second major issue with the shoes is that there's a heavy amount of oxidization on both outsoles. Specifically, there's a decent amount of oxidization on the blue part of the outsole near the Jumpman. The only other major issue that is on the uppers of the shoes is that the back tabs have completely faded, but I think I'm going to go ahead and leave them that way as I like the look of it. While the shoes look pretty dang good on the camera, there is a tiny bit of dirt on the uppers of the shoes, and there's a tiny stain on the sock liner of the left shoe. To start off, I'm going to go ahead and remove the laces before I start cleaning the uppers of the shoes. Hopefully after I end up cleaning the shoes, maybe that'll end up showing some hidden damage that I wasn't able to see before with the dust and some of the dirt that was still remaining on the uppers of the shoes. Since the uppers of the shoes were already so clean when I ended up getting them, I only ended up having to do 2 sessions of cleaning with a medium bristle brush to get the uppers looking nice. Now while I'm at it cleaning things, I'm going to go ahead and give the outsole of the shoes a deep clean. After I get the outsole completely covered with the soap from my medium bristle brush, I'm going ahead and using a stainless steel wire brush to help remove some of the deep stains and some of the oxidization. With the uppers completely cleaned, I'm going to go ahead and start skiving some of the original glue and some of the remaining bits of the midsole off of the uppers of the shoes. If you made it to this part of the video and have been enjoying it, it'd be greatly appreciated if you went ahead and liked and subscribed. Also, if you're interested in seeing some in-depth before and after photos of each restoration, you can go ahead and follow all the MHS socials with the links below. After a few sessions of cleaning the outsoles of the shoes, it's time to go ahead and throw them into the light box. Since the entire outsole has a decent amount of oxidization, I'm going ahead and putting sole sauce over the entire outsole. Normally I would end up just taping all the blue and white parts of the outsole, as I typically don't like to deoxidize them, but since there is some oxidization on them, I'm going ahead and having to do that. For deoxidizing the outsoles, I ended up throwing them in there for 5-10 hour sessions, and that's when I ended up seeing that the outsoles were not getting better, and that's when I decided to take them out. After the second session, that's when I ended up taping up the rest of the outsole, as I found that the blue parts of the outsole had finally gotten to the point where I wanted them to be at. With the outsoles in the light box, it's finally time to go ahead and remove the midsoles from the donor shoes. For the donors, I ended up using a pair of Jordan Flight Club 91s, as they share the same outsole and midsole as the Jordan 6. For these shoes, I ended up taking the insoles out and then spraying some acetone onto the footbed liner. Alongside using acetone to help melt the glue, I went ahead and put my blow dryer into the inside of the shoes, as that ended up helping way more than the acetone did. With the uppers of the donor shoes removed, it's finally time to go ahead and start removing the outsole from the donor midsoles. For this, I ended up using a tiny bit of acetone and ended up using a bit more heat from my blow dryer, as that seemed to work a little bit better than using more acetone. For the parts of the outsole that ended up sticking up onto the midsole of the shoe, I ended up using a small flathead screwdriver to kind of pick them up, and then I could use more of the heat to slowly pull them off. Now with the midsole separated from the rest of the donor shoe, I can go ahead and start getting them to fit perfectly onto the uppers of the shoes. To start off, I'm going to go ahead and Dremel some of the remaining midsole bits off the upper of the shoe, as it was causing some fitment issues between the midsole. To do this, I'm just using a Dremel or a rotary tool with a sanding bit on the end of it. With the uppers clear from debris, I now can start working on sanding the remaining debris on the midsoles. I will also take a little bit more out of the midsole so that I can get a perfect fitment between the upper and the midsole of the shoes. With the donor midsoles ready for paint, it's time for me to go ahead and make the custom mix for the University Blue. For this original mixture of paint, I went ahead and ended up just using some blue and white paint and ended up throwing a little bit of red in there later on. I later on ended up having to fix this mixture as I ended up doing it incorrectly, and the blue ended up coming out more neon than I would have liked. With my original paint mixture ready, I went ahead and started sanding down the midsole with some 400 grit sandpaper, and after that ended up using some cotton balls and acetone to remove any of the sanding residue and to remove some of the paint off the midsole. To start painting the midsole, I went ahead and just used some white paint to get a nice base layer over the entire midsole. I also made sure to lay the white paint quite heavily on the areas where I'll be adding the blue paint, as I'm using this white paint similar to a primer on a car paint, as this will end up changing a bit of the hue to the blue paint that I add later on. Here I ended up adding down my first few coats of my original blue coat, but here you can see that it is a little off compared to the original University Blue color. I decided after 3 coats of painting the midsole to go ahead and change up the blue color as I wasn't happy with how it was coming out. For my second paint mixture, I ended up adding more white paint to dull out the blue that I already had, and then added some more red paint to give it that reddish hue that the original color has. After I made the paint mixture, I went ahead and sanded down the blue parts of the midsole with some 400 grit sandpaper again, just so that it'd be easier for me to add the new blue coat that I ended up mixing. Unfortunately, before I was able to finish the paint match, I ended up running out of all 3 paints that I needed to finish said paint match. So while I ended up waiting for the new paint to come in, I just decided to go ahead and buy the University Blue paint mix that Angela sells. While I was waiting for the paint to be shipped to me, I went ahead and started putting some white paint down onto the outsole of the shoe. The reason I'm putting down the white paint on the clear parts of the outsole is it helps hide some of the imperfections that could be on the midsole. This white paint also helps how the outsole looks, as all the clear parts of the outsole have a uniform look. One of the last things that I need to do before I can finish the shoe is go ahead and decrease the toe boxes on both shoes. Luckily, both of these shoes have very small creases in them, which means it'll be a lot quicker for me to get the shoes decreased. Specifically for these Jordan 6s, I only ended up doing 2 sessions of decreasing before I got the desired results that I wanted. Now with the University Blue paint in hand, I could go ahead and finish up the midsoles. For this, I ended up doing 3 coats of the University Blue paint on the areas that I needed to paint blue before I was able to get full coverage on them. And to make sure that I got full coverage, I ended up painting a little bit below the midsole where the outsole would end up covering over it, just to make sure that I got the full coverage. The last part of this restoration is for me to go ahead and repaint the upper of the shoes. The uppers of the shoes weren't in bad condition, but the paint was slightly faded. Before I started repainting the uppers of the shoes, I went ahead and sanded them down with 400 grit sandpaper and used some cotton balls and acetone to remove any of the sanding bits left. For these shoes, I also made sure to paint a little bit below the original glue lines just to make sure that I was getting full coverage over the entire upper of the shoe.
We must pay homage to him.